Yeah. Hi, hello everyone. This is Shanmugaraj. Welcome to my channel, which is AgileBizLeaders. Today we are continuing our journey on PMBOK8. So I've started a series on PMBOK8. We are going to talk about multiple things as part of PMBOK8. We're going to discuss all the standards and gates to the project management, right? So in this video, particularly as part of the standard of project management area, we're going to discuss about the foundation elements of the project management, right? So as you know, already know that this initiative of this particular channel is to build a global knowledge sharing platform in the domains of project management, agile and leadership. So either you can join me or help me sharing your knowledges with me, or you can share my videos to your friends who are in need of it, right? So having said that, let me get into today's video. The foundational elements that has been defined as part of PMBOK8, four important areas within that. The first two we are going to discuss in this video, which are project value creation and how governance is being linked with the project management, right? So we'll be discussing operations and PM and hierarchical relationship in the next video. So as part of the foundational elements, let us try to understand the characteristics of a project, right? So it's the first characteristic of a project is it is a temporary in nature, right? That means it has a definite start and definite end, right? So unlike ongoing operations, projects are temporary initiatives, right? They have a defined beginning and end, and they has been initiated to create value, right? So when the project work is temporary, the deliverables and value created often persist long after the project concludes. You can take execution of a metro, right? You can take construction of a house as an example, right? So what are the conditions for project closure, right? The project ends when the objectives are achieved. You can close the project when the objectives cannot be met or resources are exhausted. That means the project is failed or terminated, right? Then there is a misalignment between the strategic priorities, then you can discard your project. You can terminate a project in a legal or regulatory issues. So these are the places you can conditions for the closure of the project. The second characteristics of a project is unique context, right? So every project is a different project, right? So even though you may be working the same domain, same technology, but every project has uniqueness to it, right? Because it has specific conditions, right? The environment, goals, risks that distinguish one project from another, right? For example, if we're implementing an ERP project in Europe, right? But multiple countries, when you implement ERP within Europe itself, each region will get into a new project for you. So you can execute that ERP project as part of a program or portfolio, but when you implement for every region, each region will represent uniqueness to it. So that specific conditions, right, that distinguish one project from another, right? Uniqueness arises from difference in technology, stakeholders, geography, compliance requirements, and organization culture. So even projects aiming for the same value, right, to two similar software deployments differ based on where and for whom they are executed, right? You can deploy the same product for the multiple clients, but every client is different. Even for the same client, you may go for different regions because every region is different, right? So this unique context requires tailored management approaches, right? So you cannot copy paste strategies often fail. The third and final characteristic of a project is driving change, right? So project is an agent of a change. From a business perspective, project's purpose is to move an organization from a current state to a future state, right? So complex projects often require a transition state, intermediate state, where the steps are taken structurally to bridge the gap between the old and new. The future state represents the achievement of the specific objective and the realization of the value defined by the stakeholders. So the successful completion, it's not about just finishing the work, it's about successfully moving the organization to the desired future state. So this slide talks about a pictorial representation of transition from a current state to a future state. That's the purpose of the project. So you may do number of project activities, right? Activity A, B, and C, right? You can build WBS, you can do milestones, all those things, right? You can plan and execute, monitor and control to move from the current state to the future state. So now let's move on to a second foundational element of project management, which is governance, right? It's about direction, control, and compliance. So governance provides a high-level direction and control through policies, processes, and procedures to meet strategic goals. So it is inspired by the laws, business domain, regulations, industry standards, and custom organizational policies. So what could be the key objectives of organizational governance is it ensures transparency, oversight, it ensures compliance and resiliency and adaptability for stakeholders. Right? So what kind of influences it can have on the projects? It will enforce a strict legal and regulatory requirements and promotes the alignment of portfolios and projects with the organizational mission. Right? Finally, governance will have a focus on the value. Right? The governance will facilitate high-level decision making that maximizes the delivered value connected to the broader system for the value delivery. Right, so we discussed about organizational governance, then we look at the governance at the project level. Right, so organization governance will govern all the programs and projects. Right, organizational governance will give guidances to the project governance as well. Right, so what is the definition of a project governance? Is an adoptable framework specific to the project that guides activities to the creative value. Why we are looking an adoptable framework? You can adopt the framework from an organizational governance, but why we need at the specific at the project level? Because each SOW, each MSA will differ to the company to company or client to the client. So you definitely need to have a project level governance to create the value to the particular project. It's about tailoring the organizational governance to a project. You can think like that. So project governance ensures the unique product or service aligned with the organization's strategic and operational goals. So definitely the project governance need to align with the organizational governance as well. So it provides structure, decision-making models and clearly defined roles. It might use tools like RACI metrics, right, to define accountability and communication protocols. Right. So it also ensures the alignment with the stakeholder expectations by establishing the clear rules of engagement. So now come to the point of integrating governance, right? So we understand organizational governance provides overall direction, while project governance focuses on specific implementation processes, right? So governance helps prioritize initiatives and allocate finite resources, right? It can be budget or talent to support strategic objectives. So how do the effective governance structures, right, resolve, escalate issues and enforce quality standards. So that's how we can integrate the governance with our project activities, right? So both levels are essential. So you should be able to govern, right, integrate project governance with the organizational governance so that projects may be executed well, right? So without this interaction, without this intersection, right, the project may fail to contribute to the strategic vision. So now let us look at project initiation. This is where we are authorizing the change for a strategic realization, right? The projects are authorized by organizational leaders in direct response to the strategic objective realization and stakeholder needs. We need to understand the purpose of change. The projects provide the means to make the necessary organizational change to address the critical factors, right? So initiation categories, why and all we initiating the project, what are the factors that drive the project initiation, that include meeting the regulatory standards, legal requirements, satisfying the key stakeholder needs and requests, right? Implementing or changing the business or technological strategies, or creating and improving or fixing the products, processes and services, right? So where is the strategic link? The initiation must ultimately demonstrate a clear link to the organizational strategic objectives and business value. So with this, we have come to the conclusion of this particular video. We talked about a couple of elements as part of the foundational aspects of the project management. We discussed about the characteristics of a project, right? Uniqueness, right? It talks about the definite beginning and end. And then we talked about the value delivery within a project, and we also talked about the governance, organizational governance and project governance, and how the interaction between these two also required, right? So let's look at next two elements in my next video. So with that, I'm signing off. See you next video.